online as well, because we do have quite a few people following us from home or wherever they are, maybe already on holidays. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this event on 365 Days of Youth. And together we will look at the legacy of the European Year of Youth, which isn't quite over yet, but still there's already half a year behind us and there's a lot still going on. We will, first of all, before we dive into the heart of the matter, I'd like to make just a couple of housekeeping remarks. For those of you who are here in the room with us, we do have Wi-Fi. I'm not going to give you the code because it's a bit complicated, but it's just around the corner here in case you want to double check it. It's EP visitors, EP-visitors for the code. Then we have interpretation in 10 languages, so you're used to that. You have the choice of the language that you feel most comfortable in, and that's, of course, also for those of you who are following us online. We will invite you to raise questions to the speakers, both here in the room but also online, so do feel free to send your questions. We will do our best to answer as many as possible. We do have a rather tight timing. We have a lot of experts with us this morning, but it would be really nice if we could have some interaction, because that's, after all, the aim of this discussion. It's not us talking at you. We'd like to make this an exchange as much as possible. If you would like to follow us on social media and promote the event and raise your remarks as well and talk about what's happening at this table, do use the hashtag #ProgressiveForEurope. So that's progressives, plural, for the figure Europe, Progressives for Europe. That's for those of you who are following us online as well, of course. And don't hesitate to raise your questions, as I said, at the end of every panel. So we will remind you when the time comes, but you can already prepare them while our speakers will be presenting. I would like now to give the floor to the president of the group, who couldn't, unfortunately, not be with us this morning, but she really wanted to share her greetings with this whole group. And so I give the floor to Ms. Irache García Pérez.
Queridos amigos y amigas, lamento no poder estar ahí en persona, pero quiero aprovechar la oportunidad de reflexionar con vosotros y vosotras sobre cómo podemos lograr un cambio real para los jóvenes en Europa durante el Año Europeo de la Juventud. Estoy absolutamente convencida de la capacidad de los jóvenes y las jóvenes para cambiar la sociedad. Malala tenía 17 años cuando ganó el Premio Nobel de la Paz por su trabajo en defensa del derecho a la educación y con ella el de todos los niños y niñas. Greta Thunberg no tenía ni 17 años cuando logró el apoyo de millones de personas para luchar contra la emergencia climática. Y este año el Gran Premio del Festival de Cannes ha sido para una película sobre la identidad de los adolescentes y su camino hacia la realización personal. No siempre es fácil, pero los jóvenes pueden aportar nuevas ideas y energía para construir un futuro mejor. Y la sociedad necesita de esa energía. Para aprovechar todo su potencial se deben dar algunas condiciones. Y nuestra tarea como legisladores, expertos y activistas es garantizar que puedan crecer en un entorno seguro, donde puedan aprender, socializar y prosperar, disfrutar de la diversidad cultural y la ciencia, pero también estar protegidos de la precariedad y la violencia. Cuando era adolescente entré en política y me afilié al Partido Socialista Obrero Español porque quería cambiar las cosas, porque quería una sociedad más justa, más inclusiva. Empecé en mi ayuntamiento con apenas 20 años, en Laguna de Duero, y luego en el Parlamento Autonómico, más tarde en el Español. Finalmente llegué al Parlamento Europeo con 29 años. Han pasado ya bastantes años, pero nunca he dejado de luchar por los derechos de las personas, defendiendo la igualdad y una sociedad progresista e inclusiva para todos y todas. El Año Europeo de la Juventud debe servir para hacer oír la voz de los jóvenes en la toma de decisiones económicas, políticas e institucionales. Debería acelerar el progreso para lograr la estrategia de la Unión Europea para la Juventud y tener un impacto duradero y significativo en la vida de los jóvenes. Queremos un cambio concreto y ahora es el momento de hacerlo. Pongamos fin a las prácticas no remuneradas y garanticemos igual salario por igual trabajo para todos y todas. Asegurémonos de que los jóvenes puedan acceder a la cultura y a una educación de calidad. Facilitemos que puedan buscar y verificar la información que encuentran en los medios y en las redes. Y sobre todo, animémosles a un pensamiento crítico y que piensen por sí mismos. Reconozcamos títulos, diplomas y calificaciones de otros países de la Unión Europea de forma automática para permitir la libre circulación de jóvenes y eliminar obstáculos innecesarios. Para terminar, me gustaría hacer una referencia a los últimos retos a los que se enfrenta Europa. Las medidas del COVID han golpeado duramente las generaciones más jóvenes, causándoles angustia mental en ocasiones, en muchas ocasiones. La guerra contra Ucrania está trayendo solicitantes de asilo, la mitad de ellos niños y niñas, a nuestros países. Abordemos estos problemas juntos y establezcamos medidas adecuadas para cuidar a la generación joven de hoy, la generación de nuestro futuro. Espero escuchar vuestras ideas y os deseo una discusión fructífera. Muchas gracias.
Ms. García Perez, and indeed, the President has already touched upon quite a few of the issues that we are going to be discussing a little more in depth this morning. To continue setting the scene, I would like to invite Ms. Ellen Fritzen, Vice President of the Socialist and Democrat Group, to take the floor. Good morning, Ms. Fritzen.
Good morning, and thank you so much, and thank you, Irache Garcia Perez, my president, for a very strong speech, and welcome, I will say, to everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you to this event, 365 Days of Youth. Today's event takes place at midterm of European Year of Youth, a year that celebrates, encourages, and puts on the focus on young people. I myself started my political work when I was a young girl in Sweden, so I really look forward to hear about all your ambitions about the future. This European year is much needed. During the pandemic, young people around the world put their lives, their projects, and dreams on hold. We cannot give young people their time back, but we can ensure that we do our best to give the young people opportunities for the future. And therefore, we are here today to start thinking of the changes we want to see in terms of mentality, policy changes, and new instruments or mechanisms. Around 1/3 of the EU 27 population was under the age of 30 in 2019. In our S&D group, we call for intergenerational exchanges and a progressive and socially inclusive society. And the ongoing crisis needs strong leadership and bold decisions, but these decisions must be grounded in our values and focused on the future. Gender equality and the green transition must be at the core, and it must go hand in hand. The EU youth policy has existed for some years, but in reality, it is still at its infancy. There are already several Council recommendations, conclusions, and decisions, including promising and significant recommendations for young people. We have heard it. We have heard about the child guarantee and the reinforced youth guarantee, the youth strategy, the European Youth Work Agenda, the Bonn process, and the completion of the European education area. However, what all of this have in common is that they are much needed, yet implemented too slowly and too tentatively. So this year, we want to see real change, and it starts with involving young people in decision-making at all political levels, local level, national level, international and global level. We also need to valorize all forms of knowledge and know-how from our youth and ensure that we facilitate for young people to travel, to stay, to study, and work anywhere in Europe. We need to ensure that there is affordable housing, education and care around Europe, and that the youth has a quality start to working life. Today, we turn to you for inspiration and useful advice about how to turn this European year into concrete changes where it is most needed. We ask you, the speakers and the participants in this conference, but also all the followers in the room, but also all the followers online, to share your experience regarding the challenges young people face today, how these can be addressed through policy instruments, how best to involve young people in decision-making at all levels. Basically, how to turn words into action. So we, as members of the European Parliament, rely on your input because we need to formulate ambitions and give clear recommendations to the Commission and the Council for a lasting legacy of the European Year of Youth. I really mean this. We will listen to you. We will collect your input and bring it with us in our parliamentary work. I have worked as a mayor in my hometown in Sweden, and there we try to give all young people the power on all political decisions in our city. And it was very, very important because most of the relevant issues are about the future. And that's why the young people must take place in politics. So I personally really look forward to your contributions and your recommendations here today. Thank you so much for being here together with you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fritzon. Indeed, we have now really set the scene, and I think you heard the call for contributions and for participation in this discussion, whether here in the room or online. So we'll be waiting for your comments and questions. The time has come to open our first panel, and I would like to invite Anna Pirskalova, who is going to be the moderator, and all the speakers of the first panel to join us here. And while they are coming up, to maybe have a closer look at what we will be discussing in that panel. We will be looking together at how we can better protect children and young people from adversity. And that means quite a lot of the issues that have been raised already by Ms. Fritzon in terms of the impact of the pandemic, for instance, and the impact in terms of mental health, but also sort of more day-to-day things such as access to the labour market. So there's quite a lot of, quite a broad range of issues that young people have to face, which do put them in a situation of adversity. So Anna, yes, I let you put your name tag on, and over to you.
Dear friends, I'm Anna Pirskalova. I'm the Secretary General of Young European Socialists. As you know, YES is an umbrella organization for all social democratic, socialist and Labour Party youth organizations. Before introducing you the panel topic, I would like to start with introducing very, very interesting speakers. I will start with Alicia Holmes. She is the president of Young European Socialists and also the member of European Parliament. Here we also have Nick Morgan, who is the co-founder of Eurojust Mental Health, and we also have activist Jakob with us. And last but not least, we have Eylem Eydemir, member of the ETUC Bureau. So thanks a lot for being with us and having this diverse panel regarding the representation of the organizations. As you know, and as it has been mentioned by the opening speakers, we are now, this year is declared as the European Year on Youth. But we young people, and me also representing the Young European Socialists, very big youth organization, we do not want this year just to be a nice and beautiful title and to have only the discussions, interesting discussions, but then nothing really executed or done. So our main aim is to have the discussions, but also to have concrete policies, concrete changes that young people need nowadays. We have faced a very heavy crisis, COVID crisis. And now when we are almost toward the end of the COVID, we see that the pandemic has really affected young people, and we see that young people have the scar from the pandemics. And we are the generation who already have been experiencing the consequences of 2008 crisis. And now another crisis just hit us very hard. And young people who should be now planning their families, building their careers up, we are the ones who really suffer the most. So in this panel, with our speakers, we will explore more on in which ways pandemic had affected young people. So with my first introductory question, I will go to all the panels, and I will start with Alicia. What are the challenges that you can identify that pandemic put on the young people that we have to tackle?
Bueno, I will speak in Spanish, just in case someone wants to put the, the headphones. Bueno, pues muchas gracias por la introducción, Ana. Yo creo que como bien explicabas, ¿no? La pandemia ha afectado terriblemente a nuestra generación, ha afectado evidentemente terriblemente a la sociedad en general, ¿no? Pero a nuestra generación en particular una vez más. Y yo diría que ha habido muchos temas que se han puesto sobre la mesa que han sido trascendentales, ¿no? Durante la pandemia, como es el tema de la salud mental, pero creo que aquí nuestros compañeros van a hablar más extensamente sobre el tema. Así que me gustaría centrarme en dos temas, ¿no? Yo creo que la juventud ya lleva tiempo en ello. Tiene dos temas, ¿no? que aborda y que lidera de manera clara y evidente, y que durante la pandemia, a pesar de esa pandemia, de esa crisis, no ha dejado de luchar por ello, y son los temas del cambio climático y la lucha por la igualdad de género, ¿no? Yo creo que son dos temas prioritarios para nuestra generación, además de, evidentemente, pues, los temas que sufrimos, ¿no? Los problemas que sufrimos para emanciparnos, ¿no? Todo lo que tiene que ver con el mercado laboral, todo lo que tiene que ver con vivienda, todo lo que tiene que ver, ¿no? Con todos esos ámbitos que nos afectan en nuestro día a día. Pero yo creo que dos grandes luchas que lideramos la juventud son esas, ¿no? El cambio climático y la igualdad de género. Pero también me gustaría destacar una lucha más estructural, ¿no? Que el material quizás no lo protagoniza tanto la juventud, pero que sí que creo que es un pilar de la socialdemocracia en este siglo, que es la lucha contra la meritocracia, ¿no? Que creo que durante la pandemia pues, también nos ha afectado mucho como generación y lleva muchísimos años afectándonos. Yo creo que el mayor reto para una persona joven es casi siempre superar esa herencia social, ¿no? de la que proviene por su familia, y eso no debería ser un condicionante para tu futuro. Entonces, por mucho que una persona joven se esfuerce, lo que determina su éxito en la gran mayoría de los casos acaba siendo siempre pues, el origen social que tiene. Y yo creo que es una cosa con la que debemos terminar, porque al final las oportunidades nos las tienen que ofrecer, ¿no? Pues las instituciones. No tenemos que depender del dinero que puedan tener nuestras familias para poder tener esas oportunidades. Y yo creo que aquí los que estamos en política, ¿no? Tenemos una gran labor que realizar para poder generar esas oportunidades que durante la pandemia pues, se han visto tan dañadas. Entonces yo, un tema que sí destacaría es este de la lucha contra la meritocracia, porque creo que al final la socialdemocracia europea ha sido la que ha construido ese estado del bienestar en los últimos 50 años, y ahora tenemos que convencer a la gente que eso de la meritocracia pues, que es un mito, que pueden conseguir lo que quieran, evidentemente con esfuerzo, pero también con la ayuda de las instituciones a todos los niveles, y que su origen familiar evidentemente no debe condicionar ese éxito al que puedan llegar con su esfuerzo y sus ganas, ¿no? Entonces, yo lo dejaría aquí y
Thank you, Alicia, for wrapping up very well the challenges young people face. And with my second question, I would go to Nick, and later on also activist Jakob. You are working in the organization that deals with the mental health. That is the biggest challenge. When we ask our members in the pandemics what has been the biggest problem for them, something that they want us to address, the mental health was the number one. So can you please elaborate on it more and what your organization is well doing regarding the matter? Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you for the introduction. I'm going to address the elephant in the room. I'm from the UK. I thought I was going to combust into flames when I walked in. Luckily, I didn't. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting us. I'm a citizen of Europe and the world, and I'm the director and founder of Euro Youth Mental Health. So mental health has hit everyone hard over the pandemic. And more so young people who are often have been trying to continue to live a life, whether that is at education, in work, starting out at work. We know across the world that young people were the first to lose a job during the pandemic as kind of doing freelance or gig economy workers. And internships, companies who couldn't now finance those internships, they're kind of, oh, we're going to have to lose some money in that sector. So that in itself is a big issue. What I will say, I think, in the title of this particular panel, I think protecting young people from adversity is actually something that is more or less impossible to do. But what we can do, and I think needs to be done, is a better and a more appropriate set of education kind of circumstances and policies that readies young people for adversity. So, you're looking at more mental health kind of support and awareness and education, as well as things on relationships, gender understanding, and I had another one. It's gone. But I just think that some of the education we're currently getting might be a bit outdated, and in order to prepare young people for adversity. If one of the biggest challenges I think that everyone faces, but I do think young people get impacted more by it, is the unknown of if the last few years have shown us anything, is the unpredictability that is life. And I think for a long time we've not had any such big pandemics. You mentioned the crash of 2008, and now we've had the pandemic and the cost of living, and I don't want to get into that. So I think those are some of the biggest challenges. Speak closer to the microphone. It's not what I've been told in the past. It's usually please talk further away from the microphone. I hope you caught some of that then, but to sum up, I was talking about how young people, you all need to be gaining skills and kind of life readiness skills that maybe aren't being facilitated appropriately at education at school, but also for new workers, for young people in the workplace when they start in their careers and their professions. What we do, so Euro Youth Mental Health are an advocacy organisation. We work with young people for young people. I can touch more on this later, but our role is to ensure that young people are at all the tables where decisions are being made about youth mental health across Europe as a continent, not as any of the institutions. So we currently got seats at the World Health Organization's Pan-Europe Coalition for Mental Health, which actually came out of the pandemic. It was initially an emergency committee that was put together to address mental health during the pandemic. And now it's been made to continue its work more generally. We're also part of a European-wide members of European Parliament interest group as well as an NGO. And so our role is about getting young people at the forefront of those conversations, very much about what today is about in very many other topics. And I guess that's how we can help. We can help support and train those, especially those with lived mental health experience who maybe feel anxious about sharing your lived experiences or talking more openly about mental health. That's a platform we can provide. Jacob, would you like to address anything?
So I feel that in my personal experience, especially there's been a continuous wave of issues affecting young people. So I can't think of any main challenges as per se. So from my personal experience, it's definitely been like loneliness. I found that social media is excellent for bringing us all together and giving us that instant connection. But over the pandemic, over the past 2 years, I feel that we haven't been able to be together, and that computer screen is a complete barrier to that connection. So I feel that a lot of young people and like people like me have also been kind of, I feel like we've been kind of like cast aside, forgotten in during the pandemic. I feel it was a lot about jobs and stuff like that. But it's only coming true that, mental health of young people is in a dire situation. But that was what it was like beforehand. But it's just highlighting how bad things are. But luckily now, things are getting on better. I feel like I can go out and see people. But I feel like it's taken, I know a lot of my friends, it's taken us a lot of time to readjust. And it's like learning how to socialize again, learning how to go out and feel safe. So yeah, social media is amazing, but it also has its flaws. And it makes it, I feel like there's some kind of popularity contest with social media, wanting likes and just wanting approval and validation from other people, which in the end really only feeds our inner demons about ourselves. So yeah, I think that's what I've got to say at the moment. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nick. Jakob, your organization indeed is doing an important job. And my next question goes to Eilem, who represents ETUC Youth, trade union youth organization. We have discussed the economic impact on the young people's lives. So since you represent the trade union organization, I want you to reflect about will the reinforcing the youth guarantee help us in anything, and as well introducing the child guarantee that we are discussing at the moment. Can you just tell us if it will be helpful and in what ways?
I will speak in French, if I may. Bonjour à tous. Donc, tout d'abord, un grand merci pour avoir organisé une discussion sur un sujet très important aujourd'hui et également de nous avoir invités. Tout d'abord, j'aimerais dire que le plus gros défi aujourd'hui pour les jeunes travailleurs, c'est de sortir de la précarité, d'éviter la précarité, de pouvoir se projeter dans un avenir où ils ont un emploi, où ils ont une vie sociale et professionnelle, où ils sont comblés. C'est un énorme défi. Et pour répondre à ta question, donc Anna, oui, je pense que renforcer la garantie jeunesse, la garantie enfance pourrait fortement aider les jeunes à sortir de cette précarité. On a connu avec la crise financière déjà il y a plus de 10 ans et toutes les mesures de récession qui ont suivi, que les jeunes ont été les premiers à être impactés, les premiers à être frappés de plein fouet, à perdre leur emploi, leur source de revenus, parce qu'ils sont prêts en fait à entrer sur le marché du travail en faisant des concessions, en acceptant des emplois temporaires, des emplois parfois très, très, très mal payés, des conditions de travail lamentables, pour justement pouvoir se créer un avenir meilleur. Mais justement, ce sont ce type d'emplois qui causent le problème. Et il faut mettre en place des programmes comme la garantie jeunesse, la garantie enfant, pour permettre à ces jeunes d'avoir un emploi stable, un emploi de longue durée et dans des très bonnes conditions. Et donc, oui, je pense que c'est plus que le moment de renforcer ce programme de garantie jeunesse, parce que il ne faut pas non plus que l'Union européenne paye la précarité. Il faut maintenant mettre en place des normes de qualité pour que ce programme fonctionne, pour que ce programme crée réellement des emplois sur le long terme, des emplois stables. Et Quand je parle de normes de qualité, je parle effectivement d'un contrat de travail qui soit juste, je parle d'un salaire décent, des conditions de travail, un environnement de travail sécurisé et saine pour les travailleurs. Du coup, j'espère que les politiciens au sein de l'Union européenne et au niveau national également prendront des mesures strictes, des mesures contraignantes pour pouvoir implémenter ce programme, créer des emplois pour les jeunes. Parce que tant que nous ne leur offrons pas ces emplois, ils continueront à travailler dans des jobs précaires, des jobs qui les pousseront encore plus dans la précarité. Et ce n'est pas ce que l'on veut, ce n'est pas la solution. Il faut leur offrir un avenir meilleur, des meilleurs emplois.
Thanks a lot. Now, before going to question and answer sessions with participants with Zal, I want to give the floor to Alicia since she's about to leave us. So I really want to use the time we have left with her, and I want to ask her for one or even maybe two concrete recommendations that she would give us. Yes.
Okay. I will turn into Spanish again, just to make you understand better. Okay. Bueno, recomendaciones para este año europeo de la juventud. Yo creo que una de las luchas que, de hecho, mencionaba la presidenta, ¿no? Irache García, que tenemos que liderar la juventud y que yo llevo ya años, ¿no? que llevo luchando por ello, es el tema de las prácticas no remuneradas. Yo creo que es una lacra para nuestra generación. Creo que en la Conferencia del Futuro de Europa se dejó bien claro la posición que teníamos en esa materia y creo que es un tema que debemos abordar y que deberíamos liderar nosotros como familia política, ¿no? Creo que estaría muy bien terminar este año europeo de la juventud con una política que está tan enfocada, ¿no? en nuestra generación, entre otras muchas. Evidentemente podríamos hablar pues, de alguna coordinación en materia de vivienda, que es un problema que también vivimos en la juventud. Podríamos hablar de alguna acción en materia de salud mental, que seguramente los colegas pues también lo van a hablar, pero yo en materia laboral quizás el punto que creo que nos machaca más es el tema de las prácticas no remuneradas, aparte de lo que hay detrás, ¿no? También de pues cuando trabajamos en nuestros primeros trabajos, salarios inferiores, demás, que es algo que también tenemos que abordar, ¿no? Pero si tuviera que decir una, que es lo que me has pedido, Ana, sí que me quedaría con que se terminara ya con esa práctica de no pagar a los jóvenes por realizar unas prácticas laborales.
Thank you, Alicia, for being with us. It's very important to have young MEPs that represent also young people, and then that can push such important measures, as you said, unpaid internships, for example. So now, since we want our panel to be interactive and also to give the floor to young people to ask questions and to intervene, I will go to give the floor to the YES Vice President, Enrique Lopez. So Enrique, please introduce your question, what young people want to know from the panelists.
Well, thank you so much, Anna. First of all, I would like to thank the speakers and the panelists that are here with us, and of course, Alicia, Nick, Jacob, and Ellen. It's been really incredible to listen to you and to learn about the work that you do. It's only timely that we are discussing this today, as the young people are one of the groups that have been most affected by the pandemic. But they were already affected a lot by the previous crisis of 2008, and we are accumulating a lot of challenges, and this pandemic has only made them worse. You made excellent points about how young people, how the career of young people is, for example, determined by their inheritance, and how the social elevator is not really working as it should, about the impact of the pandemic in mental health, and the role of social media in loneliness, something that everyone who uses social media probably has felt at some point. or how precarity is still the biggest problem for young people. Before I open the floor to the rest of the public to make questions, I would like to ask you what has been your perception about the response from public institutions to all these challenges that young people are facing, if they are doing enough, and if not, what could be improved. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for the question. Enric, so Nick, maybe you can start. Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to solve all the world's problems now. So I think there has been some positive response. I'm obviously speaking from a very mental health biased conversation in regards to, as I mentioned earlier, the coalition that the World Health Organization have made around Europe and mental health. A lot of conversations in those meetings have been around the workplace, around work well-being, work-life balance, and going back to what people have said about, you know, and I've always championed young people being paid for their skills and their time, not even just at internship level or kind of expert by experience level. There's always skills and expertise that should be paid for the right price. But I think it's a really big question that I'm trying to wrap my head around. I think there has been a good positive influence. I think a lot of organizations did react speedily. But I think what now needs to happen is what we've all touched on is actually out of this year of youth, there needs to be some key policy instruments and actual tangible things that governments and organizations and institutions can be given and recommended to move us forward from this. Obviously, there are other pandemics and tragedies happening as we speak, but we still have to try and move together to help each other. And I think there could be some more tangible guidance then and resources being given and shared. Something we do at Eurojouth Mental Health is we try our best to share best practices, for instance, and to, you know, a service or a support element practice that works in, say, Sweden. We might try and link up with someone in Albania and see how and where that could work. And I do think there's something like that could be really useful. And just on that as well, you know, we do have a mental health helpline, youth helplines map on our website as well, which I know doesn't specifically answer your question, but I wanted to mention that anyway. Yeah, so I'm going to stop there. And I don't know if, Jakob, you have any?
I feel there's a lot more being done. I feel previously there wasn't much youth participation in really anything. I feel like our voices kind of got lost within the crowd of just professionals. I've attended a lot of events like this for young people where there has been no young people at all actually speaking. So it's excellent to see the change, and it's coming slowly. But I feel that mental health is still getting lost. Before the pandemic, it was in dire situation. Now, after the pandemic, even more dire situation. And I can only speak for the UK. In a sense, there's being cuts left, right, and centre. And I know personally, I couldn't access mental health support via our free healthcare service. I had to access privately, despite my parents being on very low income. And this has brought a huge burden to my family. And in terms of work, I feel that as personally with someone who's not in employment, because of struggles with autism, there is very much a need for workplaces to listen and cater for young people. When we spoke about good working conditions, I love to know like what people think a good working condition is, because it's very personalised. So yeah, I think we're getting there, but not quick enough. Not quick enough at all.
Yeah, just to quickly echo Jacob's point about cuts and things, it's the same as across Europe when it comes to mental health. It's been ironic that there's been the World Health Organization and big institutions have done those sorts of things, but then on the ground, those are the services that have been lost.
Thanks a lot, and also thanks for sharing personal experiences. It matters as well to when we want to relate to an issue. Now, Eilem, if you want to also answer the question Enric gave to us. Okay, then I will go to public. Since we want you as well to pose your questions to the panelists, if anyone is willing to ask any questions. Yes, I see a hand. Please, introduce yourself.
I'm speaking in Italian, it's okay? Yes? Ok. Buongiorno a tutti, sono Isabella De Gregorio, sono stata invitata da Smeriglio, che ringrazio, e sono molto felice di essere qui e di questa opportunità, perché da giovane coinvolta in tutti questi discorsi penso che sia importante appunto dire la nostra opinione. Ho preso un po' di appunti, quindi vado un po' in ordine rispetto alle cose di cui abbiamo parlato. Prima di tutto il tema della meritocrazia e delle opportunità dei giovani. Si dice che ovviamente i giovani non devono essere condizionati dall'origine familiare, però non ci sono delle soluzioni su questo. In particolar modo io sono arrivata a Bruxelles grazie a un Erasmus che ancora oggi risulta elitario, in quanto non permette a chi non può permetterselo economicamente di poterlo fare. E questo è un grande problema, perché l'Europa, nonostante ci siano da anni eventi e una mobilitazione per modificare questo grosso problema che concerne tutti i giovani d'Europa e non solo, perché l'Erasmus poi arriva anche in altri paesi extraeuropei, nonostante questo appunto non ci sono delle soluzioni. Quindi lascio un po' il mio input per cercare di modificare qualcosa rispetto a questo problema, perché è necessario stanziare dei fondi per permettere a tutti, non solo coloro che hanno una famiglia che può aiutare, di partecipare all'Erasmus. Io personalmente non avevo una famiglia che poteva aiutarmi e ho accettato di venire in Erasmus con i miei genitori che mi hanno detto: bene, se vuoi fare l'Erasmus lavori, vai a Bruxelles e trovi un lavoro. E l'ho fatto, così arriviamo al secondo argomento, cioè il lavoro. L'ho fatto, ho cercato un lavoro a Bruxelles. Peccato che ovviamente, nonostante avessi diciamo, i criteri in regola per poter avere un contratto vero e proprio, sono stata assunta con un contratto di apprendistato per lavorare proprio qui nelle istituzioni europee. Ho lavorato come addetta stampa e nonostante questo non ho avuto un contratto per numerosi mesi, perché era un periodo di prova. Io il contratto però non l'ho mai letto, avevo bisogno di lavorare e quindi ho lavorato lo stesso, e nonostante fossi nel cuore dell'Europa non avevo tanti dei diritti che credevo di avere. Quindi è necessario, soprattutto dopo la pandemia, ma ovviamente per sempre, al di là della pandemia, il fatto che i giovani possano avere equi diritti per l'accesso al lavoro e che non vengano sfruttati solamente in quanto giovani. E più volte il mio datore di lavoro, che non dirò ovviamente ad alta voce, mi ha detto: ma come? Perché poi mi sono licenziata. Ma come? Ma sei giovane, ma è un'ottima opportunità di stare dentro le istituzioni europee, perché ti togli da questa opportunità? E io mi sono tolta da questa opportunità perché lavoravo troppo, perché non vedevo i miei diritti rispettati. E quindi solamente in quanto giovane si sono permessi di dirmi queste cose, perché se avessi avuto anche solo 10 anni in più, queste cose non me le avrebbero mai dette. E noi giovani abbiamo delle nuove richieste, nuovi benefits, chiamiamoli così, oltre ai diritti, per il nostro mondo del lavoro, che vediamo molto diverso da quello che c'è attuato oggi. E purtroppo queste richieste, questa visione di un nuovo mondo del lavoro non viene ascoltata dai nuovi datori di lavoro, al di là del fatto che siano privati o pubblici. E per questo il grande problema che ho notato è che non ci sono aspirazioni. I miei amici non hanno aspirazioni, non hanno più sogni, non desiderano arrivare lontano, tra virgolette, perché tanto si sono rassegnati al fatto che non cambierà niente. E concludo dicendo che tra le altre cose sono cofondatrice e presidente di un'associazione che si occupa di educazione all'affettività e alla sessualità e di mental health, che in Italia stiamo portando avanti un disegno di legge per introdurre un programma nazionale di educazione all'affettività e alla sessualità e ovviamente salute mentale all'interno delle scuole. E ovviamente il terreno è molto difficile perché in Italia ovviamente c'è grande reticenza a parlare di queste tematiche e soprattutto a introdurle negli ambienti scolastici e pubblici. L'ultima cosa, ultimissima giuro, è l'ingresso dei giovani in politica, visto che si parla tanto di giovani e siamo in un contesto politico in questo momento, è che trovo assurdo, trovo veramente assurdo e vi lascio con questo input, che ancora oggi ci siano differenze a seconda degli stati per essere eletti in Parlamento europeo. E ci sono stati dove si può essere eletti a 18 anni, stati a 21, stati a 25 ed è assurdo che ci sia ancora questa differenza ed è assurdo che anche in tutti gli stati i giovani non possano avere un equo accesso alla politica semplicemente perché sono giovani, perché ci possono essere giovani con molto più valore di altre persone, ovviamente poi lo decideranno gli elettori, ma non ci possiamo nemmeno provare perché la barriera esiste, è chiusa e abbiamo un muro davanti a noi.
Thanks a lot. It was more like reflection than a question, but thank you for that as well. You raised and touched very interesting topics. But since now the time is running, I want to ask panelists, and I will start with Elam, to sum up, maybe also to reflect the comment and the question, but also, as I asked to Alicia, to give one or two very concrete recommendations. And then I will give the floor to Nick and Jacob.
Ok. Tout d'abord, un grand merci pour ton expérience. C'est très intéressant et ça reflète beaucoup l'expérience des jeunes en général en Europe. Il y a clairement un problème donc, dans le système d'éducation des jeunes. L'Erasmus, clairement, devrait être financé d'une façon ou d'une autre pour plus d'élèves qui veulent voyager et apprendre, se former dans d'autres endroits de l'Europe. En plus de ça, donc, par rapport à ta question, enfin, ta réflexion sur le travail, je suis tout à fait d'accord avec toi que trouver un emploi pour les jeunes est extrêmement difficile. On se limite souvent à des emplois très précaires, à des emplois limités dans le temps ou à des emplois où les conditions ne sont vraiment pas terribles. Et donc, pour résumer, moi, si je devais choisir une politique pour commencer à améliorer les choses pour les jeunes, ce serait, je suis d'accord avec notre camarade qui nous a quittés, c'est d'interdire les stages non rémunérés, avoir des emplois de qualité pour les jeunes, parce que les jeunes font exactement le même travail que n'importe quel travailleur. Il ne faut pas les sous-estimer, les sous-payer ou leur donner des moins bonnes conditions de travail parce qu'ils sont jeunes.
Thanks a lot for the message, a strong message. Nick, please.
Thank you. So just to say thank you for your comments as well. There was a lot resonated. I, in another hat, do workshops on toxic masculinity in the UK, which is a lot of conversations about sexuality. So I might chat with you later. So key recommendation for you, to be quite frank, I think for me, and I'm going to be a bit mental health biased, for mental health education to be given parity of esteem in schools and education systems across Europe where possible as physical education. We've touched on a lot of things around pressure to work and your story about, oh, this is a good opportunity and you're young, so you should take it regardless if you're not getting paid anything, is disgusting. And so I think by providing more awareness and mental health knowledge and capability, not only will that help us manage adversity and difficult times, but also hopefully increase our confidence and the ability to say no and know your worth as young people. Just because you're young, you should not be. I say you because I'm 38 now, but young people should not be made to feel that they don't have something to contribute just because they're young. Yeah, I'll stop there.
I feel that all education providers should have, all staff should have mental health training to understand, because at the end of the day, if a child feels supported, then they flourish. They won't feel forgotten, they won't feel misunderstood. So I feel if a you know, if anyone had better mental health support and a teacher could pick up on it and say, hey, do you need some help? You know, they may have bigger dreams, they may have bigger ambitions, and, you know, it just gives them hope. So, yeah, I just think just awareness and education and training is just absolutely crucial to a whole of a young person's future, not just their education.
Thanks a lot. Now to very briefly conclude, I really want to thank all of you for being with us, even though we didn't have that much time, but I think we really touched very important topics to reflect on. And before handing over the floor to Florence to continue with upcoming panels, I also would like to thank SND for always having, yes, Young European Socialists included in the panels, in the discussions, and we with great pleasure will always join in the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you to all our speakers. So I'm now going to introduce our second panel, and while I do so, I would like to invite our moderator and speakers to join me here at the table. As I said in the beginning, we have decided to have 3 separate discussions this morning, but clearly they are all interlinked, as we will hear from our continued discussion, as we have already heard, because moving on from adversity, issues of exclusion and discrimination, we're now going to focus on education, and we already started touching upon education, as Jacob in particular was just mentioning a minute ago. So we'll focus on how education is really the best investment we can make in the future, and how, how we can best support young people with the appropriate education, the appropriate training, and appropriate structures behind, so that they are successful. So it's my pleasure now to welcome our second moderator, Pina Tucci, who's the president of the Lifelong Learning Platform, and she's also the Secretary General of OBESU, the Organizing Bureau of European School Students' Unions. Good morning, Pina.
Good morning to you and good morning to everyone, and thanks for having us. Very good bridge from someone speaking a lot about education to this panel, so hopefully we can also go a bit more in depth on this topic. Let me first start by thanking all of the panelists, which I'm going to introduce in a second, the SND group, and to take a moment to appreciate the so many fantastic young women that have been here this morning and are here throughout the program. It is inspiring, fantastic, motivating. I couldn't be happier to be in this room today. It was mentioned before, we are in a time when education systems need to be improved, to take giant steps to achieve a learning Europe and to respond to the challenges we have to face. We mentioned a lot of them in the panel before: precarious living and working conditions, expensive education, COVID-19 recovery, a pandemic of mental health, a shrinking space for participation, mistrust towards civil society, and I can go on and on and on about all the problems we have, but I'm going to stop here because I'm sure we're going to tackle solutions to all of them in the panel. And as Anna mentioned before, this panel, we would like to take a very policy-oriented discussion, because the European Year of Youth for us cannot be a year of branding and happiness only, but it has to be a year of solutions and of concrete co-creation of policy, so that young people, and in particular, in this case, learners, can take a bigger role in shaping European policies in Europe. And I'm very happy to discuss today with I'm going to butcher some names, but let me go through it. Ioana Surubaru, President of the European Confederation of Youth Clubs; Caroline Moch, Coordinator of European Young Christian Workers, a youth member organization of ESA; Martina Darmanin, the President of the European Student Union; and Victor Negrescu, SND Cult Vice Chair, as well as member of the EU40 network of young MEPs. So very happy to have everyone on board. We're going to try to have a bit of a structure where we ask a question, have 2 minutes, 3 minutes to respond, and I am very tight on time. I'm very sorry, I'm going to be like tick, tick, tick. And then the other panelists also have a minute to, if they have any burning comment, to address it then. So we have a bit of a interaction there. So let me start with Victor, actually. So we set a bit the scene, if it is not.
We can start with
No, because it was a different order, but...
changing the format.
Changing the form. We changed the format. Okay. So we start with Martina. You want to start? Very good, Martina, for taking this role. Martina, we have discussed a bit about modernization of education. What do you think are the ingredients of successful modernization of education systems in Europe? Do you think member states have enough capacity and funds to modernize their education systems? And do you think it would be helpful to request member states to maybe invest a percentage, let's say 10% of their GDP in education and training?
Thank you very much for the floor, and to the organizers for having me here. I was asked a similar question yesterday at the UNESCO Transforming Education Summit, and I hope to be able to convince you as much as I tried also yesterday. So let's start from scratch. We want to modernize our education and training system, then we need funds to do that. And in my opinion, these funds should be balanced between three pillars. Starting with the first pillar on equity, inclusion, and diversity. So this would mean that students can get access to publicly funds, both financially, but also while they're in the institution, that they can get counseling and guidance services. We would have a teaching force that is not only well-resourced, but that is also provided training initially and continuously. So this would be the first pillar. The second would be on innovation and flexibility. That there are funds going into internships, digital tools, mainstreaming education on sustainable development, on climate change, and this notion of interdisciplinarity. And that's why I mentioned flexibility. Our education systems need to learn how to adapt to change. The third pillar is on enabling our education community to organize themselves and to exercise their democratic rights. And I refer particularly to students and to staff organizations, that they would be able to access funds for their operations to represent their constituencies. These three pillars are interdependent. If one pillar falls, the other two suffer. If you don't have a civil society organization that represents you, you can best assured that other points are not going to be advocated for on equity and innovation. If you don't have innovation, you can have the public not trusting the education system. And if you don't have equity and inclusion, you can forget that you can get quality education without having as many people on board. So on whether we have enough funds, well, the Recovery and Resilience Facility should have been a good boost in this regard. And I really do think we should stop focusing on whether we have enough funds. I think we're wasting a bit of our time and instead put our time and focus on asking if the funds we have are being distributed properly. And unfortunately, I can't give you a clear, true picture of what's going on in that regard, because similar to when the National Recovery and Resilience Plans were being drafted, our member national unions of students are not being considered as equals or as partners in the planning and implementation of national budgets on education. And even their members on the local level are not being involved at every stage of the budgeting of education institutions. And this is where we need to get our information from. So yes, it will help to have a 10% GDP, but if we do not have independent and organized and legitimate representative eyes on those budgets, then we can forget that these are going to be accountable.
Thank you very much, Martina. Of course, you raised many very interesting points. I'm asking anyone sitting here if you have any reaction or burning questions, or we can slowly transition into, because you mentioned, Martina, actually, that the role of civil society, student organization is extremely important in participating, in co-creating budget and making sure that money are distributed properly, also according to the needs of learners and students more in general. And another very important role of civil society organizations in education system is that of contributing to the learning environment through non-formal education and youth work. And so I'm going to jump on to Joanna to see what do you think, how do you see the role of youth work in the larger in a learning environment, but also reflecting more in general, the pandemic has really affected many youth organizations, smaller youth organizations. Many have shut down their operations, many have been heavily affected. What can we do to sustainably reconstruct and strengthen youth work and its role in education?
Thank you. Well, when we talk about investing in youth work, we are always thinking about the future. But thinking about a singular future, I think it's a bit of a nonsense, because we will be dealing with multiple and very volatile possible futures. And as we take into consideration the complex interactions between digitalization, globalization, or climate and democracy crisis, we realize that the volatility of the social and economic landscape is rising. As such, it is impossible to predict what skills tomorrow's generation need, not just to cope, but to thrive. So our main focus in the present should be on finding ways to develop so-called meta competencies, which youth can use in 5, 10, or even 20 years to develop specific skills that they will need. And that's precisely where youth work comes and plays a greater and greater role, simply because it's much more difficult, I think, and more time-consuming to implement such initiatives in formal learning environments. Time which we cannot afford anymore, right? And that's where power of policymakers comes in, because while there is little space to intervene into member states' institutionalized learning, the EU has far more instruments when it comes to programs based on informal education. This idea also fits into how youth work can be reconstructed or better supported after COVID, although here I have to say, even before COVID, youth workers was not really a priority, or not a big enough priority, I would say. And I will be short and simple, through policy and financial support. We need far more than a bunch of events like this, although I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy that this is happening. But this should be continued into policy and concrete actions. And the key here is not to just throw money at the problem. That's not enough, and I think this goes very well with my colleague here. But it is to push member states to make youth work a reality in their countries, to support and facilitate development of quality development of youth work, and to have policies in place that will make everything possible. Yes, thank you.
So on time, 1 second left. Thank you very much, Johanna, for your contribution. And I think this goes very well with what, I don't remember her name, Isabella, I think was saying before, about also funding mobility opportunities, for example, strengthening the budget of Erasmus to make it more accessible, to make it widely accessible, and to go a bit beyond the idea that Erasmus is only a university opportunity, that there are many other important elements, particularly, for example, there has been a growing support of vocational education and training in the Erasmus budget, for example, and here I would like to maybe bridge a little bit towards Caro. Vocational education and training is extremely important. Joanna, you mentioned we cannot really predict the skills of tomorrow. We don't have a crystal ball. We can forecast skills, of course, but we need to develop lifelong learning competencies. We need to develop learning to learn, and we need to interact between the non-formal and the formal level. And so to Caro, I have a bit of a complex question, which I'm going to have to read because it's very long. And it is concerning your experience and whether in your experience we should focus more on promoting flexible learning pathways to learning, as I said. That is to say, to facilitate the passage from formal to non-formal to vocational, so moving a bit around the education spectrum, and to do so whether it is useful to achieve, for example, automatic mutual recognition of diplomas, qualification of competencies, or whether you have any specific input you would like to share on this very wide matter that I'm going to ask you to address still in 3 minutes. Thank you, Caro.
Thank you very much. When you get to know other young people, new young people, one of the first questions you ask is, what are you studying or what have you studied? So educational pathways define us in some way. We are used to being measured in our degrees or in the prestige of the learning institution we have studied at. But have you ever asked someone what skills they learned or what they learned being a voluntary firefighter? I haven't, actually. So people learn in different spaces, they learn in different ways, and they use different paths. So I think it's crucial when it comes to giving equal opportunities to recognize what people have learned and not how they did it. Non-formal and informal learning and ways of learning are not only individual, but they also often have a positive effect on our society. Just think about a firefighter. But not only that, also the YouTube video we watch 100 times to fix our phone. What could be better, not only for our wallet, but also for the environment and the other people we help fixing their phones afterwards. But with all these positive effects, we should not forget that acquiring knowledge and skills is not everything, because we easily fall into an efficiency trap, I would call it. And we cannot reduce people to their capability of updating their skills regularly just to be competitive. Lifelong learning, voluntary work, and also on-job training has to be with the aim of personal development. And we also have to take into account those people who are in precarious working situation or unemployed. I mean, both of these realities are very common among young people. We heard some examples already. And a person who is in a time-limited contract has much less opportunities, for example, for on-job training. And if we look at the needs, they are fully out of the formal learning environments. So what could be a better way to get to them than a less formal and a more individual way of learning, and giving them the opportunity also to have that recognized? So my answer is quite easy. It's yes, yes, and yes. It's good to open your mind to new things, and it's good to have different opportunities. We should not be punished for that. Either is it as a volunteer firefighter, or is it fixing phones with YouTube videos, or with an on-job training. Thank you. I took those 2 seconds.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about this duck. It's my signature move. Unfortunately, I cannot stop it sometimes on time. Thank you very much, Caro. Extremely interesting input, and I think it bridges very well to my last question that I'm going to ask Victor to start answering, and then everyone else, if you want to comment, please feel free. We really cannot reduce people to competition. Reducing people to competition and training them just for the labor market is extremely detrimental to their well-being and to fostering this narrative of precarious living conditions and learning to working continuously. It's really something that gets engraved in our brains since a very early age. And it is for sure one of the challenges of education and training systems nowadays in Europe. But I was wondering, what do you think are the main challenges that education and training systems in Europe are facing right now, and how can we valorize vocational education and training, making sure that it stays away from being this just tool for the labor market, and to make sure that it just serves this specific purpose?
Thank you so much for the invitation. It was really interesting to hear the previous speakers. And indeed, of course, when we refer to education, we also have to precisely refer to what we are pursuing at European level. And for me, it is essential, again, to go to the core. We need to make sure everyone across Europe and beyond as well gets access to quality education, not just education, and learning across their lives for free. And sometimes this issue is forgotten. And this should be the case, again, like I mentioned, for everyone, independently, again, of the differences. And education should have a purpose. And of course, like you mentioned very well, education is linked with labor life, but it's not only linked with that. It's linked with personal development, with reaching your own potential, and in the same time, making sure that we are building and training and guiding people towards becoming responsible towards the society, towards the environment, towards their community. And those elements are also crucial. Therefore, of course, here in the European Parliament, the S&D Group has advocated for all of those elements every time. And this is not an easy debate. Because you mentioned earlier, I listened to the previous speaker saying we want results. Results are generated by political debates and by solutions laid down by politicians. And we do that, and unfortunately, even here in the European Parliament, we have people that, for instance, when we are registering the amendment to allocate 10% of GDP for education, we have people voting against. When we came up with the recommendation, it's the S&D Group, and I was one of the authors, we came in with a recommendation to allocate from the recovery plan 10% for education. We had people in this House saying no, and we had people in the Council, heads of the government and heads of state, that said no. But despite this fact, we made this recommendation, and now we have, in average, a little bit more than 10% of the recovery plans going for education. Because you need the money for all of that. The money is not the only solution, but it's part of the solution. So, of course, designing all of that is crucial. Involving everyone in the process is crucial. It's not an easy way, but again, we are the lucky ones, the ones sitting here in this room. You probably know a lot of people, young people, but not only young people, that were not fortunate enough to get access to education. I build a lot of social activities. I try to help people get access to education. And I know young kids walking 7 kilometers to go to a school. I know in the same time kids that are too hungry to go to school. And this is happening in Europe. 10% of young individuals in Europe are not finishing their education. So imagine 10% of this room getting out of the room because they are not allowed, not helped, not supported to go to school. This is a lot. In Europe, imagine that in Africa. Imagine that in South America. These are real issues for which we need real solutions. And I think these conferences are helping this, build those solutions. This is why we are here, my colleagues Petra and Massimiliano, we are here listening to you, picking your ideas, my colleague Helen as well, because we need your ideas to know how to push for them politically, because we need political solutions for all of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very true that we need political solutions, of course, and this is why we are extremely happy to be here, and we're happy that we have a listening ear. Sometimes it's true that we need it also at the national level, and that is not very easy to achieve. It's a bit, I think there are some European institutions, and particularly receive better sometimes civil society than the countries manage to do, and that is one of, I would say, one of the main challenges that we have, particularly in education, because at the end of the day, education remains a national matter to be solved and addressed. I'm going to ask the rest of the panelists here if they have any remarks on this item, or whether they have any input, particularly regarding how we can make sure that young people and learners can participate better in co-creating change in schools, in universities, or in other paths of education. I come with surprise questions. Go ahead.
May I add something on the money discussion? Because I think both me and the rest of the panelists mentioned it, and Victor pointed it, that it's good to have money, and I do believe it's good to have money, but at the same time, please make sure that the ones that get the money know what to do with them. Because it's not just enough to have the money, you should also have the competence to use the money for the good of young people and for better opportunities for them and for creating a better future for them acting in the present. And yeah, that's it.
So, I'm a strong advocate for a European dimension on education. Of course, here there are different schools of thoughts also in the European Parliament, some believing that we are stealing competence from member states. But I strongly believe that Europe can do more on education, like we did on health during the pandemic. So I'm supporting this idea of having a European plan for education, meaning that really trying to assist member states, local communities, also NGOs, to try to tackle the challenges existing across Europe with regards to education. In some parts of Europe, it's about quality. In other parts, it's about access. In other parts, it's about the digital side. There are many challenges. But those challenges need to be followed through. And we need the money to be used in this direction. So this is why you also came up with this idea that in the European semester format, which does an evaluation of what member states do, to have a more in-depth evaluation of what is happening on education, with clear and more integrated recommendations. And those recommendations should also be the result of the Commission engaging with you at national and local level and picking up your ideas and introducing those recommendations there. Because, again, everyone speaks about education. And generally, to be very frank, politicians like to make pictures with students, with professors, and say, we support education, especially when we are close to elections. We like it. People like education. But in practice, we look at statistics. We have less professors per pupils today. We have, again, problem of brain drain from Europe in other parts of the world and also within Europe. We have the process of quality. We have the problem of, with the digital part, artificial intelligence in education, all those new tools is also a big problem. We have the problem of mental health mentioned earlier. So really, I really believe we need this integrated approach to try to make sure that, again, the money is being used wisely, but also when we fix targets, we have a lot of targets at European level, we deliver upon them across Europe and not have places where things are really going well and a lot of places where, unfortunately, things are not moving as fast as possible.
While passing the floor to Caro, I would just thank you for mentioning actually also the European semester and the last country-specific recommendations. There is a complete lack of looking on education. There is very little on education and even less on lifelong learning and keeping a holistic approach when looking to education, because we should also not forget that education is a very complex matter. But I don't want to take too much time from Caro for last remarks.
Yes, I want to add something to that because I think I've heard it a little bit, but I want to say it concretely. And it's please include trade unions, civil society organizations in the policy making, but also in the execution of the policies. I mean, there are a lot here, and those who I know they do great work. So when you say that we don't only need the money, we also need to know how to use it, there are a lot of experts for that. And so I would really encourage to give a big focus on this and really include us.
And maybe from this we can give a big shout out to all the youth organizations and civil society organizations in the room and outside of the room online that work tirelessly, I don't know how to pronounce this word, on achieving concrete goals for youth through the limited funding available with an extreme amount of expertise. So big digital claps for everyone. I am going to skip 1 second the policy recommendation question that I have for you. I'm going to ask you to use it to wrap up in a spotlight. And I would like to give the floor to Rea from, yes? Lea, I will see. Hello.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much to our panelists for their very insightful contributions. And this topic is something I care very strongly about myself, being one of the first in my working class family to attend university. Our panelists have identified the importance of investment in education and employability training. And children and young people have the right to accessible and affordable education, and using a human rights-based approach can ensure the modernising of education systems to provide high-quality education and skills training to youth across Europe. When youth education is neglected and youth services and education like mental health services are underfunded. This has far-reaching ramifications for the well-being and prospects of youth. Northern Ireland clearly illustrates this. 24% of children are growing up in poverty, resulting in educational underachievement, as some 30% of young people are leaving schools without sufficient qualifications and without basic employability training and skills. This is particularly apparent in areas of socio-economic deprivation. 12.6% of young people here are experiencing mental ill health such as depression, and 1 in 8 have thought about or considered taking their lives by suicide. These are very stark statistics, but we know that quality, accessible and inclusive education can change lives and transform the future of youth. The question should not be about the cost of investment in education, but rather what is needed to improve education systems so that they work for all youth across Europe. And I would like to put this question to our panellists if I could. We are presented with a very unique opportunity to address underinvestment in youth as we build back from the COVID-19 pandemic. How can we ensure that in developing education and employment policies in our new future, that all youth are included and considered, such as disabled youth, Roma youth and migrant youth, in order to realise opportunities for all youth in Europe?
Thank you very much, Lea. I'm passing the floor to the panelists to answer the question that Lea asked about how to make sure, if I'm not mistaken, that everyone, particularly more marginalized young people, can participate in shaping education and employment policies in Europe. And if I'm not mistaken, Lea will also help us a bit to see if there's any questions on social media. Am I mistaken? No, I'm not mistaken. I don't know. So I'm just gonna ask the panel to answer this question and then open also the floor for any further question that you might have.
So I can take this question and give an example of how the European Students' Union has been advocating to be supporting people of diverse backgrounds to become advocates on education. And one group in particular was with young people and students with migrant and refugee background. We were running a project for 5 years, the Together Moving Forward project, and we gave out around 500,000 euro in funds to local grants and projects. But not only that, after 5 years, we saw organizations being formed in Brussels. We are now having a memorandum of understanding with the voices of young refugees in Europe to be able to help them understand how they can organize themselves better based on the practices ESO has had in its 40 years of existence. So we are trying, and the house is literally on fire. We have more and more young people questioning why it's important to participate in unions and associations. They see it as work that is underpaid, undervalued, and unappreciated. And I don't blame them. It's hard to see your impact in student unions. You often see it within 5 years' time, the impact that you have had on certain policies. So I would say, just to sum up and use the time also to sum up, that yes, of course, ESO would be behind initiatives to increase the target of having 10% GDP. And we would also be contributing towards a European plan for education. It would be as important to be recognizing how important it is for young people to participate in organized movements, not only in a one-year initiative or in some activities or in some conferences, but to get in organized movements. That is where we can sustain our influence in policies and have a more sustainable approach. Thank you.
I have apparently stolen Florence's job on the Q&A, so I am very sorry, Florence, for stealing your job on this. I'm just gonna...
That's okay. Absolutely, absolutely no problem.
Before the others can get a chance.
Absolutely no problem. But I mean, let's continue the discussion before we take questions from the room. So, Carol.
Yes, thank you. I want to add something, and I think in many. In many cases, vulnerable and disadvantaged groups are more difficult to reach, and I think that is something very important we need to be aware of, and we need to make ourselves aware of. When we are often asked, why don't you reach out to more people? Well, it's more difficult to reach out to certain groups, and so it also takes more time and more money. And so I think that's very important if we talk about this topic.
I will adjust the dimension, of course, a practical one. So I think we are waiting for too much for young people coming from disadvantaged backgrounds to come towards us, even towards NGOs, or to participate. It is clear that this is not working. So we have to go to them, where they are, discuss with them, involve them, work with social workers in the same time, with the local authorities. It's very important to have this local approach. And this is the case also for the European programs. So we tried here in the Parliament to come up with this proposal and convince the Commission to have a more integrated, a more inclusive Erasmus. But Erasmus is not inclusive. A student coming from a disadvantaged background cannot go in a mobility in France or Germany with 600 euros. They cannot. But imagine a pupil as well doing that. They cannot. So we have this issue, and we have to deal with it in a very, very concrete way and see what are the challenges. In the same time, we want pupils from rural areas to participate in mobilities between schools, and they have to, register online. Some, to be very frank, some don't have the possibility even to do that, and not even to talk about the information on how to complete the formula and give all the information that are required. So I think we need to have a more down-to-earth approach if we want to tackle all those challenges, because if we only focus on statistics, sometimes statistics can be presented in a positive way. But the reality on the ground that you presented as well is a little bit different, and of course, I think we have to have this more integrated approach.
Thank you. Pina, I could see you were nodding, and since you're not moderating anymore, maybe you'd like to chip into the conversation.
I mean, if you insist, I'm not going to say no. No, definitely agree with this. I mean, I think we have a massive issue with inclusion, not only in Erasmus programs, but generally in education throughout Europe. We leave also education institutions as very stiff, absolutely not ready to welcome every single learner, every different kind of learner, or to really include more non-formal education institutions that sometimes are better at outreaching to more disadvantaged students. We also relegate, for some reason, which is something that really bothers me as a VET learner, as a former VET learner. What bothers me much is that VET is this dumpster where, like, everyone that comes from a disadvantaged background, they need to go to VET because they need to learn skills, because this is going to help them to achieve their working life and therefore become very, very good members of society. And that to me is extremely bothering, that as soon as we have a migration crisis, we invest in VET to put all the migrants in vocational education and training, for example. Until we continue thinking like this of education systems, we cannot achieve a real change, I believe. And then when it comes to Erasmus program, of course, we need much more to make them more inclusive. It's not only a matter of money, it's also a matter of infrastructures, as you mentioned before, of thinking a bit the way that we do digital education, for example, to make sure that we can achieve. The language support system is completely online, and it's very complicated for some people that have no linguistic competencies from before to actually engage with the program, for example. So there are many things that can be changed in practice, and many that require system change in education systems. So I think we have a lot of work ahead of us.
Thank you. So yes, please, we do have another question from the floor.
Ja, vielen herzlichen Dank. Ich will gar keine Frage stellen, sondern ich möchte ein bisschen was gerade rücken, was das Erasmus-Programm angeht. Das ist noch nicht alles richtig gut. Das will ich gar nicht bestreiten. Aber ich glaube, wir sind mit den letzten Verhandlungen ein großes Stück weitergekommen. Erstens mal haben wir es geschafft, die Mittel zu verdoppeln. Wir wollten als Sozialdemokraten eine mindestens Verdreifachung. Wir haben eine Verdoppelung hingekriegt. Das ist schon mal gut. Wir haben das Programm auch deutlich inklusiver gemacht. Das heißt, wir haben Mechanismen eingeführt, die es auch Menschen aus sozial schwierigeren Verhältnissen möglich macht, Mobilitätsmaßnahmen wahrzunehmen, sei es als Student, sei es als Auszubildender oder auch den individuellen Schüleraustausch. Dass da viele bürokratische Hürden zu überwinden sind, überhaupt keine Frage. Und da quälen wir die Kommission auch ständig mit, dass wir sagen, das muss alles einfacher werden. damit es noch zugänglicher wird. Aber ich glaube, wir sind da, was das angeht, schon wirklich ein großes Stück weitergekommen. Und Erasmus ist halt nicht mehr das alte Erasmus, was nur für Studierende ist, sondern es ist sehr, sehr viel breiter aufgestellt. Es ist für Schüler, es unterstützt Jugendorganisationen bei Veranstaltungen und Aktivitäten grenzüberschreitender Art. Wir haben den individuellen Schüleraustausch neu eingeführt. Wir haben den Bereich der Praktika für Auszubildende deutlich ausgeweitet, auch finanziell ausgeweitet. Also wir sind da schon ein Stück weitergekommen. Wir sind noch nicht am Ziel. Ich glaube, unser aller Ziel ist, dass jeder Jugendliche die Möglichkeit bekommt, die Chance kriegt, an solches Auslandserfahrungen zu sammeln, egal in welchem Bereich. Da sind wir noch lange nicht, aber wir sind schon ein Stückchen weitergekommen, auch was die Inklusivität ankommt. Wir müssen da weiter dran arbeiten, aber es ist schon, also wir haben da schon ein bisschen was erreicht, wenn vielleicht auch noch nicht genug.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Ms. Gamerevert. Do we have another question from the room? Oh, yes, in the back there.
I have a question. Hi, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm Anna. I'm currently a trainee in the European Parliament, just to give you a small introduction. I really loved how Caro especially mentioned the shift from actual just education to skills. And unfortunately, and coming from my background in Spain and how difficult the job market is for young people at the moment, unfortunately, the society is still not really ready to focus on skills only, rather than, experience and numbers and educations and titles, etc. But I do really think that that's actually a very positive, way forward. And I actually agree with Victor in the fact that, and I actually thank S&D for bringing this up within the political debates. I was in one of the CULT committees where they talked about digital transformation and actually the use of e-learning and games within education and how that could be formalized a bit more. So actually within that, I wanted to raise and ask you, when we have these conversations and when we actually talk to young people and we discuss about what we actually need within education and to prepare young people better, we realize that there are many reports out there. There's lots of recommendations already, like from the Conference of the Future of Europe, like the Youth Ideas report from the European Youth Event that has them every 2 years. And actually within the last one, there were areas and recommendations from young people about digital literacy within the school curricula, about interactive digital learning tools, and a more practical focus within the school curricula. So we young people sometimes also get a bit tired of talking about the same things again and again, and actually raising them in many different forums. So we actually, we have those topics covered in so many reports at European level and at local level, national level of youth organizations everywhere. So I just wanted to maybe ask you this really difficult question of how can we make sure that these recommendations, that we're acting upon the things that we already have out there and we're not just reinventing the wheel. And maybe even Victor from, the S&D perspective and pushing this within the political debate, are these reports being considered throughout these debates? Thank you.
Thank you. So, Victor, since you were directly targeted, maybe you can start with this question.
Yeah, I was targeted. So, of course, the recommendations are being taken into consideration by the Commission, and it's important, again, our job here in this House. And I'm going to mention, for instance, the report that I've worked upon, shaping a digital education across Europe, and we influence the European Union digital education agenda. So many of our proposals were integrated in the proposals of the Commission. And what I'm trying to do personally, and I think everyone is doing here, is to try to have a follow-up, still pressure the Commission, have the discussion with them, make sure that things are happening at national level. Sometimes it is the case, things are happening, and sometimes, unfortunately, some of our recommendations and even some of the things mentioned in common European documents are not followed through. So this is why we need to pressure that and continue, again, working on those respective activities. And also, this is where we need you to tell us what is working and what is not working. What is the difference between what we agreed upon and what is the reality? what is the difference about debureaucratizing something and what is happening in reality in practical terms. So of course, I also sometimes have the feeling that you mentioned that we are doing the same discussions all over and so forth, and we need more acting. So this is why personally I feel sometimes the need again to go back to different activities and to really act, and I do a couple of concrete activities in this regard. But again, it's really important every word here in the political debate. So if you say, for instance, in a document, we recommend or we call upon, it's a big difference. So this is why we need to fight that. And sometimes, again, we have politicians, even here in this house, that prefer less recommendations on education, a text that is lighter, with no clear elements. So this is a big fight. And of course, this is, again, like I said, we need your support on that, but also we need your support in making sure that what we come up with in terms of solutions here in Brussels is also becoming a reality on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you. So I understood from what you said earlier, Pina, that you would like everybody to have a very short concluding remark. So can I ask each of you for a 3 words, 5 words, takeaway or recommendation or proposals? 3 is the minimum, 5 is the maximum. It's a short.
It's like European policy making. So you can do it between that.
Well, you need a little bit of flexibility. So, would you like to start, Martina?
Shall we start?
I can ask Pina, since she wanted to have, she introduced the idea of that very short conclusion. 3 to 5 words, maybe extended to 10, but maybe not many more.
Okay. Include organized civil society in decision making. It's 5.
Short and concise. So.
Yeah, she stole my words. No, I wanted to emphasize the fact that youth organizations, youth work are super important, and we should be taken into consideration when policy is developed, but also when we are thinking about how to implement those policies. And also, please don't forget that Erasmus is not the only youth dimension, if you want to call it like that, of the EU. So don't block yourself on Erasmus. There's that. More than 10 words, I'm sorry.
Still short anyway. So, Caro.
I think it is very important to increase the stability for young people in their workplaces, but also for their families, so they have the opportunity really to benefit from formal, non-formal, informal learning. And everything that Eileen said before.
Martina.
I'm not sure if it's 5 words. Well-defined, evidence-based policy making.
Thank you. So, Victor, you get the final word then.
So I think we need a clear European action plan for education with immediate results, ensuring access to quality education for free for everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you to you all. Thank you, Pina, for leading us through this discussion. And while we welcome the moderator and speakers for our 3rd panel, just a little highlight of how we are going to continue our discussion. We will focus on the broader idea of youth glass ceiling, because young people need to be better represented. We have heard that already this morning. They need to be empowered, but how can we help them take their place in society? How can we help them play their rightful role as citizens? And that goes, of course, beyond education. We want to involve them we have also touched upon that part of the discussion already. We want to involve them in political life and in civil society, which seems to be a bit difficult to carry out these days. So to lead us through that particular discussion, it's my pleasure to welcome Silja Markula, who's the president of the European Youth Foundation, and she's also a member of the working group on education, youth, culture and sport that took part in the conference on the future of Europe. Silja, good morning.
Good morning, thank you. The European Youth Forum, we're not a foundation. We are the largest platform of youth organizations in the world. We represent youth, civil society, youth organizations in Europe. So everything from party political youth organizations, YES is one of our members, but also Scouts and Guides, national youth councils from countries all the way up to Azerbaijan and from there to Portugal. So we're a very wide network of young people, and I'm both happy to be here as a moderator, but currently as the president of the platform, it's also my pleasure to be here and discuss the European Year of Youth with you. With me here today, I have some excellent panelists to discuss the topic. So we have right here next to me, we have Biljana Sirakova, who is perhaps met her around. She does an excellent work for young people. We have Dafina Peci, who is the executive director of the National Youth Congress of Albania, that's organizing the European Youth Capital 2022 in Tirana. We also have Nicola Tingaretti, yes, we do, who's the president of the Lazio region in Italy. And here we have Petra Kammerevert from the S&D cult coordinator with us. And the discussion really is on the broader topic of the ways to promote youth participation, representation and empowerment. And I kind of want to narrow that down and focus really on the different ways we can bring young people into policymaking and decision-making processes in a systematic way, what those different kinds of ways are, and how can we really do that in different concrete ways. We know that, at least from our side, we tend to look at youth topics, meaning all of the policy areas, not just the sort of traditional areas of education or sort of where we very often find ourselves stuck in when we talk about youth. We want to talk about employment, we want to talk about climate. All those different areas concern us as a generation, and that's a very important thing for us as we talk about youth. We don't only want to talk about education, we want to talk about all the different policy areas, since those have a very tangible impact on our lives, but also they do concern us, even if it doesn't have the word youth in it. And with that in mind, one of the ways that we at the European Youth Forum have thought about to bring that also to a European level in a systematic way, just to bring an example before I open up the panel, would be the creation of an European youth test. This is something that exists in some of our member states in the EU. It's a youth impact assessment tool where you both would involve young people when legislation is being created, and every proposal would go through an impact assessment. So not just the traditional youth topic ones, but all policy as it is being made would go through a youth test, and we would see the impacts on youth. And if there are negative impacts, then there would be different measures to mitigate those that would have to then be created and discussed. So that just as a concrete example from my side to spark some thoughts, perhaps with the panelists as well. But I'll start with Dafina. You're we know that doing proper youth engagement, it can be difficult, at least it's at least not prioritized as we're seeing. It's not happening enough right now. But Tirana has done a really good job in doing that and has therefore become the European Youth Capital of 2022. So my question to you is really how did you achieve that? What kind of resistance did you face, and how has the European Youth Capital title helped you in overcoming those challenges? Share us some of your experiences.
Thank you very much for the question. It's really a pleasure being here. Facing the resistance, I would say it has been a very difficult task in so many levels. I would like to go back in 2019, where in Amiens in France, we were announced as the European Youth Capital winners. It was several days after Albania was not accepted to open the negotiations. And I would say that during our work, with a lot of challenges going on and being, let's say, passed by the earthquake and then the pandemic, which has affected all across the world, the societies, but when you are a country in development with a lot of challenges, it tackles you a little bit differently and very harsh. The first resistance that we had to do was in terms of mentality and social discourse, because the numbers of EU believers are being put into risks in so many times, not because our societies and governments are not working. I'm talking now also in behalf of other Western Balkan countries, are not working enough in that path. But we are societies and countries in a very, very long transition, and even in terms of mentality, information, and political culture, so many things are not perceived as they should. Trying to make societies believe systematically in the European dream is a kind of resistance in itself, and it's a systematic resistance. With the European Year of Youth in Albania, in Tirana, we made possible to give a very strong impulse to the youngest generation. But through those people, through those young people, we have affected also the families, their parents, their grandparents, because, you know, when a young person experiences something great, they tend to share, and when the others feel that kind of impact that their child, their friend, their cousin is doing something good and it's moving, it also helps to strengthen that kind of impact and impulse. And I think that in 1 year and a half, we managed to give a positive impulse, not only in Tirana, but all across the country. And I would say the first resistance is exactly that one, of not being lost in translation and also trying to build hope in a meaningful way. The second one is to mainstream the youth policies. It's difficult because, for example, just to bring certain figures, we have a loss of 5.5 billion euros based on the World Bank statistics because of the youth migration. And talking about strong economies, talking about inspiring young people to be real contributors in the society, to build our local economy and to, let's say, prepare ourselves for more competitive attitude when once we'll become part of EU family, it's a hard topic in itself. So convincing young people to stay, it's also another kind of resistance that we have been doing. And how we addressed it is that we constructed a grant-giving scheme where we made possible to support 360 youth projects all across Albania under the frame of Tirana European Youth Capital. And most of these, let's say, fundings, these efforts are being put under economy, innovation, job creation, job opportunities, and a meaningful participation in decision-making processes. And it is a little bit ridiculous to mention the fact that before we started with the whole thing, we made a study in the national level, and 86% of the answers, we had questioned more than 600 young people in Tirana, and these numbers went also for 11 other regions, put so much trust in the process of Tirana European Youth Capital that they ever had put into an institution or a strategic document or what any other effort in institutional level being done for the young people. And this somehow terrified us, because it terrified us, also made us proud and happy, but when we were, let's say, thinking upon that, it put a lot of pressure in our shoulders. we made possible to realize 1,000 activities in yearly manner. Let's say around 500 of them have already happened. And to be honest, if you ask me personally, I'm in the middle of this work and I can't feel anything, but people around say that it is being a great year. So this is the second resistance, and the third I would like to mention is also a matter of cooperation and going beyond several boxes. We knew that to put financial backbone beyond this, it's going to be hard because we had to convince the local council to invest money in this huge initiative. Then we had to go in very long discussions with Ministry of Finance that they always have something more important to deal with. And we had to convince business community to see it not only as a promotion scheme for themselves, but as a new way to live in this, I would say, revolution of convergence. In my opinion, we have known so far three revolutions: the industrial, the technological, and this one that we are facing now is the revolution of convergence. How are we going to manage the situations together? And bringing all these stakeholders in a round table and convincing them to invest in a sustainable way has been the third, I would say, the third way of resistance. And how European Youth Capital helped us in this? This title brought a lot of trust on us, a lot of support. It showed solidarity, especially for Albania, which is an unintegrated country. And it brought belief, and it brought legitimacy. And I think that is one of the best initiatives that has ever been undertaken in the European level. And I really hope that through good stories, we will encourage also other societies and cities to go through it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and I'm sure you don't hear it enough. You're doing an excellent job and really creating change in so many young people's lives, and that truly matters. So thank you for that. I'll move on to Nicola next. One of the reasons that of why we believe youth participation is so important is because it really creates better policy. It creates a policy with that long-term perspective and an intergenerational perspective, and it makes policy work for the people that it's created to. Do you have an example from your region of some positive effects of involving young people in policy, and would you like to share some of those? Thank you.
Sì, grazie. Condivido moltissimo l'idea che le politiche giovanili non sono un settore delle politiche di uno Stato dell'Unione, ma le politiche giovanili coincidono con il futuro dell'Unione, e quello che bisogna fare a volte è molto semplice, semplicemente ascoltare e guardare i dati. Le caratteristiche del modello di sviluppo europeo hanno, tra le altre, 3 caratteristiche drammatiche. Siamo in una fase di crescita di giovani che non studiano, non lavorano e non sono dentro un percorso di formazione. È un modello di sviluppo il nostro nel quale più o meno è bloccata la scala sociale, e infine c'è una drammatica crisi demografica che rende la popolazione europea tra le più anziane del pianeta. Per questi motivi le politiche giovanili e le politiche per il futuro dell'intera Europa coincidono assolutamente. Per questo, oltre a pensare come coinvolgere i giovani, bisognerebbe forse semplicemente ascoltarli e guardare questi dati. Per fare cosa, o cosa abbiamo provato a fare noi, che siamo la seconda regione italiana per prodotto interno lordo? Concentrarci su 3 grandi macroaree: conoscenza, lavoro e cultura. Sapendo, ho ascoltato il tavolo del panel precedente, che dobbiamo porre una grande attenzione anche qui in Europa. Io sono stato parlamentare europeo alcuni anni fa. Non bisogna dare fondi principalmente a persone che si occupano di giovani, ma bisogna trovare il modo affinché arrivino direttamente ai giovani, perché il percorso di trasmissione dei fondi spesso fa arrivare alla persona finale solo una piccola percentuale. Che cosa vuol dire conoscenza e ascoltarli? Innanzitutto noi abbiamo un problema enorme di competizione con il mondo. Per la ricerca e lo sviluppo la Cina nel 2020 ha investito 563 miliardi di dollari, il 2,4% del PIL. Gli Stati Uniti 664 miliardi di dollari, il 3,5% del PIL. Tutti i paesi europei, 27 Stati membri, 384 miliardi di dollari, solamente il 2,4% del PIL diviso in 27 politiche nazionali. Questo non va bene, questo è un deficit di presenza accanto alle nuove generazioni. Avere 1.227 miliardi da Cina e Stati Uniti rivolti a sviluppo e ricerca e averne 384 divisi in 27 Stati membri. Politiche giovanili significa fare di tutto, ad esempio, anche a parità di budget, per armonizzare queste politiche, evitare contrapposizioni. Noi da noi abbiamo provato a farlo, sono passate da 17.000 a 30.000 le borse di studio per i ragazzi e le ragazze, indirizzate soprattutto nelle facoltà scientifiche alle ragazze, così come abbiamo raddoppiato nella nuova programmazione europea del prossimo quinquennio i fondi destinati alla ricerca e alla ricerca universitaria. Ma dentro queste compatibilità di bilancio non permetteremo mai a un ragazzo europeo, una ragazza di questo nostro continente, di essere al pari con gli altri grandi giganti nel mondo. Lo abbiamo visto in questi mesi rispetto ad altri grandi temi, penso a quello della difesa militare o a quello dell'energia. C'è bisogno di Europa perché altrimenti chi vive, nasce e cresce in questo continente ha un handicap a monte, perché potrà godere di risorse e di budget minori e con 27 politiche nazionali che non garantiranno lo stesso livello di impatto di altri grandi paesi. Poi il lavoro, che significa, e qui faccio un'aggiunta, questo è molto sentito da noi ad esempio e segnalato, per questo dico ascoltare, non sono solo politiche attive per il lavoro, ma noi sappiamo che il lavoro precario nelle nostre democrazie impedisce a tanti ragazze e ragazze di accedere al credito. In Europa non poter accedere al credito significa non poter fare impresa. Quindi c'è bisogno di grandi investimenti. Noi abbiamo 2 grandi progetti finanziati con i fondi europei che permettono, con incentivi a fondo perduto, hanno permesso di costruire microimprese che producono lavoro, ma soprattutto lavoro libero, perché è autoprodotto da ragazze e ragazzi. E anche, io credo, sarebbe necessaria forme di sostituzione del credito bancario per quelle ragazze e ragazzi che vogliono fare impresa, vogliono mettersi sul mercato, ma oggi non possono per responsabilità di un sistema bancario che non dà cittadinanza a chi non ha lavoro fisso, chi non ha una casa e chi non ha elementi di garanzia. E infine la cultura. Proprio la scorsa settimana qui a Bruxelles la nostra Carta Giovani ha vinto per la 3ª volta consecutiva il premio di miglior Carta Giovani d'Europa. Perché? Perché è caricata di migliaia di opportunità per fruire gratuitamente delle opportunità culturali di tutti. Qui dico una cosa, attenzione a non creare eventi di carattere culturale dedicate ai giovani come se fossero una setta o un circolo chiuso. Il tema è l'accessibilità per tutte e per tutti anche ai più forti e alti livelli di offerta culturale europea. Io credo, ad esempio, prima si parlava delle opportunità di viaggiare in Europa, che sarebbe bello legare la possibilità di prendere un treno o un aereo per recarsi in altre capitali europee in occasione di straordinari e fantastici eventi culturali. Il concerto di Vienna del Capodanno o l'apertura di una tradizione culturale di un paese europeo per il quale è giusto che un ragazzo, a prescindere dal reddito e dalla condizione sociale, possa recarsi e fruirne. Questi sono piccoli grandi esempi che vengono, ripeto, da una volontà di ascoltare e di collocare le ragazze e i ragazzi nei luoghi nei quali le decisioni vengono prese. Grazie.
Thank you very much for that and for the great examples that you bring to the table. It's really a wide range of different things where we need to make sure that young people have access to both finances, funding, opportunities, and so on. So that's very important, and glad you're bringing those things up. We now move on to Petra. You and the CULT committee have been doing an excellent job for young people, especially for this year. So thank you for that. Do you think we should be going to or should be willing to go really big for young people? What would that look like in terms of rethinking how European policy is done with and for young people? How do you see we should change our ways of making policy? Thank you.
Ja, vielen herzlichen Dank. Ich glaube gar nicht so sehr, dass wir einen Politikwechsel brauchen, weil es gibt unendlich viele richtig gute Entscheidungen auf europäischer Ebene. Es gibt richtig viel gut beschriebenes Papier, wo drin steht, was wir alles tun müssen. Das Problem ist nur, wir müssen es dann auch endlich tun. Also ich glaube, wir haben kein Erkenntnisproblem, wir haben auch keinen Mangel an wohlfeil beschriebenem Papier und guten Beschlüssen. Wir haben den Beschluss zur Vollendung des europäischen Bildungsraums seit 2017. Es ist bisher nicht viel passiert. Wir haben die Jugendstrategie, wir haben den Bonn-Prozess, wir haben die Agenda für Jugendarbeit. Wie gesagt, es gibt unzählig viele gute Beschlüsse auf europäischer, aber auch auf multinationaler Ebene. Die sind alle längst da. Aber ich gebe zu, ich werde dann auch persönlich ein bisschen ungeduldig, wenn ich dann feststehe, dass dem wohlfeil beschriebenen Papier und den wohlfeil getroffenen Beschlüssen auch von unseren Staats- und Regierungschefs, von den Bildungsministerinnen und Bildungsministern der Mitgliedstaaten, wenn die sich dann hinterher nicht mehr wirklich daran erinnern, was sie denn da eigentlich beschlossen haben oder sagen, naja, aber so war das nicht gemeint, was wir da beschlossen haben. Und das ist ja alles schwierig, das umzusetzen. Und da werde ich dann schon ein bisschen ärgerlich auch. Ich glaube, symbolisch steht für mich auch hier das Europäische Jahr der Jugend. Ich denke, es muss uns wirklich gelungen, aus den vielen Reden über junge Menschen ein Machen mit den jungen Menschen werden zu lassen. Das muss unbedingt im Mittelpunkt unserer Arbeit rücken. Und ich glaube, wir sollten einfach mal den Mut haben, zu sagen, ja, bei der nächsten Europawahl oder bei der nächsten Nationalwahl dürfen junge Menschen mit 16 wählen. Das sollten wir einfach mal tun. Ich habe jetzt gerade diese Woche gehört, der Deutsche Bundestag hat sich jetzt in dieser Hinsicht auf den Weg gemacht. Und ich bin mal gespannt, ob wir das dann bei der nächsten Europawahl schon erleben, dass Menschen mit 16 dann auch bei der Europawahl dann teilnehmen können. Wir sollten den Mut haben, auf europäischer Ebene ein Gesetz zu machen, was unbezahlte Praktika schlicht und ergreifend verbietet. Diese Kompetenz hätten wir, das zu tun, auch auf europäischer Ebene. Und haben wir doch auch den Mut, egal auf welcher Ebene, von der kommunalen über die regionale bis zur nationalen oder europäischen Ebene, endlich auch Strukturen zu schaffen, wo wir Möglichkeiten der Partizipation auch im politischen Prozess für junge Menschen bieten. Lass es uns doch einfach machen und nicht immer nur darüber reden, dass man sowas vielleicht dann doch mal bräuchte. Der Bologna-Prozess ist ein Prozess, den es seit vielen, vielen Jahren gibt. Und wir haben uns damals davon versprochen, dass wir gesagt haben, das macht Abschlüsse vergleichbarer und das macht es auch möglicher, Abschlüsse sozusagen auch europaweit anerkannt zu bekommen. Wir sehen heute in der Praxis, es funktioniert nur bedingt. Wir haben keine automatische Anerkennung von Universitätsabschlüssen oder gar von Schulabschlüssen europaweit. Und ich finde, es ist ein absoluter Anachronismus. Wir leben in einem europäischen Binnenmarkt, wo Kapital und Dienstleistungen frei verkehren können. Wenn wir uns aber entscheiden, in einem anderen Land zu arbeiten, kriegen wir so viele Steine in den Weg geschmissen, was die Anerkennung von unseren Abschlüssen angeht, dass man eigentlich schon keine Lust mehr hat, in einem anderen Land zu arbeiten. Und ich glaube, das ist was, da müssen wir endlich ran. Und das ist beschlossen. Und immer wieder finden auch nationale und regionale Parlamente und Regierungen Ausreden dafür, warum das jetzt aber nicht so einfach ist. Ich finde, das ist sehr einfach. Weil ich finde, das hat auch was mit Vertrauen zu tun, mit Vertrauen in einer Europäischen Union, in andere Bildungssysteme, dass ein Abitur in Italien genauso viel wert ist wie ein Abitur in Deutschland oder in Finnland. Das muss doch möglich sein. Und deshalb weiß ich eigentlich nicht, glaube ich wirklich, wir haben nicht das Problem, dass wir nicht genug Entscheidungen haben, sondern wir haben das Problem, dass wir zu langsam und zu zähflüssig diese Entscheidungen dann tatsächlich in konkretes Handeln umsetzen. Und ich glaube, das muss sich ändern. Und ich glaube, das gilt auch für das Jahr der europäischen Jugend. Wir haben mit dem Jahr der europäischen Jugend Erwartungen auch geweckt. Und jetzt müssen wir auch als Politik ein Stück weit liefern. Es ist ja nicht damit getan, ein paar schicke Veranstaltungen zu machen und wir uns alle irgendwie hinterher auseinandergehen und sagen, boah, das war aber toll. Sondern es muss ja darum gehen, dass junge Menschen auch was haben, was sie sozusagen mit nach Hause tragen können. Wie zum Beispiel das Verbot von unbezahlten Praktika. Wie zum Beispiel ein Weg, der aufgezeigt ist, wann haben wir denn erreicht, dass wir die automatische Anerkennung von Abschlüssen haben und so weiter und so fort. Was haben wir denn erreicht, um Partizipation in politischen Prozessen auch weiter möglich zu machen? Deshalb glaube ich, das ist die Herausforderung, die wir jetzt angehen müssen in den nächsten 6 Monaten, damit aus diesem Jahr der europäischen Jugend nicht am Ende ein Jahr der Enttäuschung wird. Weil das wäre, glaube ich, das Schlimmste, was passieren kann. Und insofern, glaube ich, brauchen wir keinen Politikwechsel, sondern wir brauchen schlicht und ergreifend den Mut zu handeln und die Dinge, die wir beschlossen haben, auch endlich umzusetzen.
Thank you for that. Let's hope this does not become the European Year of Disappointment. But I did hear quite a good few ideas there in terms of what could be implemented. I noted down automatic recognition of degrees, voting at the age of 16 already, banning unpaid internships, just to take some of your good remarks there to note. Moving on to Liliana, I know that probably in your corridors you feel this tension of great new ideas and people who really want to change things, and then perhaps the other side of maybe it's actually better that we stick to only decision makers doing the thing, and then young people should stay outside of that. I don't know, but really, not to put you in any awkward position or anything, but I did mention the European Youth Test as a start of this panel as something that we'd like to see as a legacy for the European Year of Youth. If that's not the legacy, then what? What does the Commission want to bring to the table? What can we expect or see or hear or wish for as a legacy?
Thank you very much, Celia, for this question. Legacy of the Year, and indeed this is the title also for this event. And I would like to also thank SND for the invitation, and in particular MEP Kamerveld for inviting me to be here part of this panel. So on the legacy of the year, I will start though a little bit broad if you allow me. First, we know that the European Year of Youth is a commitment which is shared by EU institutions, governments, and really many diverse stakeholders in Europe who work for and with young people. And while the proposal for the year came from the Commission, it was endorsed by the co-legislators. And now we see that many of the deliverables of the year, I would say even the majority of them, so these really results and actions and initiatives, they are not actually top-down initiatives. When we look at now the more than 3,500 activities that are submitted on the European Year of Youth map on the page, we see that they're actually bottom-up actions. And I think this is something that is great to see. And I really liked how, Dafina, you talked about the youth capital and this momentum that it brings, this hope and just impulse, you called it. You described the impact of that very beautifully. And I think we can say as well that for us, the European Year of Youth seems to have taken life on its own. And this is great because it makes everyone think, wherever they are, in whatever role, what more can I do for young people? What would be my contribution for this? Even if we just look at in the last 7 days, there are more than 800 tweets with the hashtag of the year. This is my plug-in here to put it, EYY 2022, and European Year of Youth is also the hashtag we use. And I know you can say, okay, this is kind of, tweets, branding, marketing, results and success. And this is one thing, but I think if one looks behind what is behind, they can see a lot of great examples of already concrete action that is happening and which are impacting young people positively. And I think as a result of all this momentum that is happening and this collective action, there will be not only a single legacy of the year, but I think that we will see multiple legacies of the European Year of Youth at all different levels. And this is what we are trying to promote as well, so that young people can see the direct impact. Earlier in the panel, there was this talk about education, and Martina referred actually to empowering students in the school structures. And I can think of an example where in a school which has never had until now any kind of student council or representative body, due to reflections and conversations that are happening in the context of the year, this is now proposed for the future. This kind of legacy in that school would have really a direct impact for the young people who are there. So we hope that there are many more such results that are triggered by the year, and with a kind of broad paradigm shift in how we include young people in decision-making and in policy-making. But as many people have said, the year is only halfway through, and we do know that there are plans of member states for actions which will bring long-lasting impact, but I think there is also space to continue the discussion. We will hear, by the way, for the different results that are achieved in a closing conference, which will happen in this house on 6th of December. The closing conference which will be in the framework of the Czech presidency of the Council of the EU, and with the involvement, of course, of all the EU institutions. But I can mention maybe a few examples from the Commission side. We have started a number of projects and initiatives which so far have been, we've been receiving great feedback from young people and the youth sector. Among them are the youth policy dialogues with commissioners, as well as the voice recording platform, where hundreds of young people have already recorded their ideas, their messages, and recommendations. The cross-sectorial dimension is quite tangible, with more than 30 directors general involved in the year and setting up initiatives for young people and strengthening the youth focus of already existing initiatives. And my personal perception is that due to the year, in a way, we are already cooperating on youth issues better in the Commission. And I think this will only grow in the future. The president of S&D, in her opening remarks, referred to this acceleration towards the objectives of the EU Youth Strategy. And I think when it comes specifically to mainstreaming youth policy, which is one of the objectives, we can already see that the year, in a way, has fast-forwarded work on that. I want to mention also the cooperation mechanism we have set up in place, where we are cooperating with national coordinators for the year and stakeholders from civil society organizations and, of course, youth organizations. And we have built quite many new relationships because of this year. So we are discussing, and I think we want to see this cooperation grow in the future, and are considering kind of different modalities how to keep this mechanism going. And finally, as you know, in the follow-up of the Conference on the Future of Europe, the Commission has already communicated, not long ago, the intention to strengthen youth involvement in policymaking. So we are drawing on the experience of the conference, are developing a new tool of citizens' deliberations for key initiatives. And like in the conference panels, at least 1/3 of these panels will be composed of young people. And I think in the cases where these panels are all composed of young people, there's indeed that idea of this youth test. So young people will also be involved in more targeted kind of deliberation and co-creation processes, but they're still thinking about this. I hope we will be able to tell you more on this. I know that the conference has started way before the designation of 2022 as the Year of Youth, but there has been such strong political pressure on the year from all institutions that I personally see a link between these decisions that were taken as a follow-up to the conference and the Year of Youth. So these are just some examples which I think will bring indeed positive systemic changes for young people. But as said, I'm happy that we have events and conversations such as this one so that we can continue the reflection, and there are still months ahead when there is a possibility to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We can for sure feel the momentum that's going on, but let's hope that it turns into actions as well, as has been highlighted, not only by you, but the several other speakers that we have. We now are approaching the time for Q&A, but I think we have a Vice President of YES from Malta, Gerwin Bugeja, who would perhaps want to start and open that for us.
So good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation. As you rightly said, I'm coming from the smallest member state within the European Union. I am the Vice President of the Young European Socialists and the President of the Labour Youth Forum in Malta, which is the youth branch of the Partit Laburista. A 25-year-old coming from, as I said, the smallest member state of the European Union, and who has been active in politics for at least 10 years now. And I agree with some of the points mentioned that this is truly an important year as the year of youth, but also this is the year that we are coming from the COVID-19 pandemic, coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as we're seeing a generation that is being traumatized with ongoing conflicts around the globe, in particular the war in Ukraine. So indeed, the European Year of Youth has to be, or is important, and has to increase opportunities, activism, civic engagement to create a European sense of belonging. However, my experience as an activist, I must admit that being a young person may prove to be somewhat challenging, maybe also because we are perceived as inexperienced because of our age and as if we do not care. But I dare to say that this is not true. We care. We want to decide our future. What we do not want is to let others decide our future with the idea that they know better. As rightly so, the president of the S&D group mentioned in her message, she referred to some youth role models in her introductory greetings. We want and we have to expose more young people to inspire further change. We want to contribute with our ideas for our future and for the future of the generations to come. Ironically, this debate and this discussion is being held 2 years ahead of the European Parliamentary elections. And unfortunately, and as it has been stated as well, we are not going to see all of the young people aged at 16 and 17 years participating in this democratic process around Europe. I remember myself being quite vocal in 2014 when Malta has actually introduced this right, and further amendments were implemented in 2018 to extend this right of voting at the age of 16, and even in European parliamentary elections, and as we have seen in general elections this year. So my question would be, how can we create an environment where young people are seen and want to participate in our society so that effectively we break the ceiling? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And moving to any quick answers from the panel, how can we create such an environment where young people are seen and heard and want to engage? Anyone? Daphne? Yeah.
Thank you for the question and for the comment. I would like to bring part of the answer in discussion, and then maybe it can be also enriched by the other panelists. I think what is important is that the youth matters should be discussed in a broader scope and not only among youth groups. I would say that it's really time for intergenerational dialogue. That these issues become political issues for real, because in the terms of voters, we know that we don't have only young people who vote and decide upon leadership, upon political system, upon the way how many things would flow for the upcoming years. It is a matter of social pact, and in order to mainstream your issues, you have to be enough strong and knowledgeable to bring arguments on the table, convince other parts of the society to be with you, and learn from other generations and build together this kind of dialogue. And I think one of the most important steps is to go from closed circles into opening the discussion in a much broader level and be present, be meaningfully present, also as youth analysts, youth experts, but also other, let's say, people which are not in the age of youth, but have dedicated their life to youth issues, be more present in media, in different platforms, and really mainstream it, but materialize, not only talk upon it.
Thank you so much. And then briefly from Biljana.
Yes, thank you for your question, and I do so much agree that with what you said. The young people care, and just recently we published the results of a last Eurobarometer survey, where indeed it shows, compared to even a few years ago, 2017, the same kind of survey, 2014, there's been a big increase of young people who are also active. They're participating in youth organizations, political organizations. They're just active in the society. So now we think that about 58%, the average at EU level, are active. And when we ask them about what are your expectations of the European Year of Youth, their top expectation of the year is for society and decision makers to listen more to the views of young people. So definitely on the part of the young people, we have that evidence. So just a few more comments to add to what Dafina was saying. I think this evidence that we have and this general evidence-based approach to the policy is also very important. This is why another thing to mention, recently we revised the EU Youth Indicators Dashboard in order to have the data, and also not only average levels, but also for certain groups of young people, disaggregated data, which can lead us in better decision making. So this is what I would say, as Celia is signaling to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a brief comment from Nicola?
Sì, brevissimo. Introduciamo però un elemento. Come è stato anche detto, io sono molto d'accordo proprio ora, non tutti i giovani soffrono i problemi di cui abbiamo parlato. C'è una parte di ragazze e di ragazzi europei che hanno genitori che hanno un buon livello di reddito e di condizioni sociali, che vivono soprattutto nelle metropoli e che sono perfettamente inseriti nei cicli formativi, che stanno molto bene. Quello che è la differenza è che sono aumentate e di molto le disuguaglianze e quindi questa fascia di giovani inserita è sempre minore e cresce invece la fascia degli esclusi. Quindi se vogliamo fare qualcosa per includere, dobbiamo soprattutto aumentare il fronte delle opportunità, della lotta alle disuguaglianze, perché le disuguaglianze in Europa sono anche e molto disuguaglianze generazionali. Dare opportunità, ad esempio da noi un progetto che ha funzionato benissimo, che si chiama Torno Subito, dà a ragazze e ragazzi, a prescindere dalla loro condizione sociale, l'opportunità di auto-organizzarsi, esperienze di studio, professionali, di lavoro in qualsiasi altro paese europeo, lavorare e fare esperienze in un anno e poi tornare nella propria casa. Questo è un esempio di come attraverso un intervento europeo si interviene nella condizione materiale di vita di chi ha bisogno e si riducono le disuguaglianze.
Thank you very much for that. And finally, Petra.
Ja, vielen Dank. Also ich rede auch sehr, sehr viel mit jungen Menschen. Ich habe ganz häufig Schulklassen hier in Brüssel, weil das zu meinem Heimatland so nah ist. Und ich erlebe eigentlich ganz häufig unendlich engagierte junge Menschen, die sich auch Gedanken über Zukunft machen, die Ideen haben, die wirklich sehr engagiert sind. Und ich glaube, das sind diejenigen, die muss man eigentlich gar nicht so sehr motivieren, sich zu beteiligen und sich zu engagieren. Ich mache mir ein bisschen mehr Sorgen um diejenigen, die sich eigentlich so sozial abgehängt fühlen, dass sie so frustriert sind, dass sie sagen, das hat ja sowieso alles keinen Zweck und auf mich hört ja keiner. Und ich glaube, das sind vor allen Dingen die Jugendlichen, wo wir versuchen müssen und wo, glaube ich, vor allen Dingen auch die Jugendorganisationen versuchen müssen, die ein Stück weit einzubinden nach dem Motto und ihnen auch deutlich zu machen, auch ihr seid ein wertvoller Teil dieser Gesellschaft und auch ihr könnt mitreden. Das hängt auch ein bisschen zusammen mit, ich sag mal, auch politischer Bildung in der Schule. Inwiefern wird man in der Schule überhaupt darauf vorbereitet, auf die Frage von Teilhabe an einer Gesellschaft? Was kann ich in einer Gesellschaft machen? Wie kann ich da überhaupt mittun? Das ist die eine Seite, aber die andere Seite ist eben auch, ich sag mal, ein Stück weit wirklich auf diese Menschen auch zuzugehen und ihnen deutlich zu machen, ihr könnt auch was verändern. Ich finde diese Idee mit dem generationsübergreifenden Dialog ganz wunderbar, weil ich glaube, dass das ganz wichtig ist, zu schauen, wie findet man gemeinsam eine gute Lösung für alle. Weil, ich sage mal, man darf, glaube ich, auch den jungen Menschen jetzt nicht den Eindruck vermitteln, sie erarbeiten Vorschläge und dann wird das genauso gemacht, wie sie das sich vorstellen, sondern das in einem Dialog gemeinsam zu erarbeiten und zu gucken, was geht und was geht möglicherweise auch nicht, weil es gibt immer auch finanzielle Hürden, die zu überwinden sind und andere Fragen, die damit zusammenhängen. Deshalb finde ich das gut. Und da müsste man vielleicht mal stärker gucken, wie man das institutionalisieren kann und wie man das in einen, ja, ich sag mal, in einen geregelten Dialog bringt, um da vielleicht ein Stück weiterzukommen.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you all for your remarks and the discussion that we've had, and thank you for the question that you brought to us. Without further ado, I'll hand back over to Florence.
Thank you, Celia. Thank you very much. Thank you to all our speakers. And I know we had a question in the room, but frankly, due to time, I'm very sorry we cannot take questions at this stage. But if we can just continue the discussion over the lunch, for instance, that we will have in a few minutes, that can also be done. So I'd like now to invite Massimiliano Smeriglio to join us to deliver his conclusions. He's also a member of the Parliament, of course, and coordinator for the S&D Group, a cult committee.
You could stay. We'll go over there.
Sì, grazie, è stata una mattinata importante di ascolto. Abbiamo potuto costruire una mappa delle parole, la solitudine, la precarietà esistenziale, l'uguaglianza di genere, l'accesso, la connessione, i diritti, il lavoro che manca, l'uguaglianza sociale, l'istruzione, il disagio. E abbiamo anche la necessità di avere un'ambizione più grande, che è quella di parlare a tutti i giovani, a quelli che non studiano, a quelli che non lavorano, a quelli colpiti dalla povertà educativa soprattutto, a quelli colpiti da scelte antistoriche come la Brexit, o quelli colpiti dalla pandemia come abbiamo ascoltato questa mattina, a tutti i giovani Dal femminismo abbiamo imparato la parità di genere, è stato un panel denso di presenze femminili, e però non abbiamo avuto presenze migranti di ragazze di seconda e terza generazione. È un problema grande perché sono parte della nostra Europa. Abbiamo avuto una mattinata tutta bianca, è un problema che dobbiamo superare, affrontare e superare. Gli spunti sono stati tantissimi. Noi abbiamo l'obiettivo di dare forza e continuare con l'anno europeo della gioventù, mettere in campo cambiamenti concreti, costruire un'eredità duratura dell'anno, anche magari ragioniamoci chiedendo, provando ad aprire una battaglia per una proroga di altri 6 mesi dell'anno europeo della gioventù, perché è coinciso con fatti storici incredibili come la guerra sul suolo europeo. E tra i giovani che dobbiamo ricordare sono quelli colpiti dalla guerra, quelli che scappano dalla guerra, quelli che combattono per la propria indipendenza, anche per i giovani russi costretti perché imbottiti di fake e ideologie a combattere sul suolo ucraino. Quindi ecco, mettere insieme tutte queste diversità. Io penso che noi abbiamo un obiettivo, che quello che il nostro appello è rivolto agli Stati membri, ai quali chiediamo di includere i giovani nei processi decisionali a tutti i livelli, basandosi sugli strumenti partecipativi, anche quelli sviluppati dalla Conferenza sul futuro dell'Europa, da ultimo, attuare pienamente in maniera coerente Garanzia Giovani, riconoscere automaticamente i titoli di studio, le qualifiche, i periodi di studio acquisiti all'estero, riconoscere le competenze e le abilità acquisite attraverso le esperienze di apprendimento non formale e informale e l'animazione socioeducativa, introdurre moduli di cittadinanza europei nei programmi di studio nazionale, ricostruire e rafforzare in modo sostenibile le strutture dell'animazione socioeducativa, contrastare le discriminazioni di genere a tutti i livelli, anche dal punto di vista dell'orientamento degli studi che ognuno di noi sceglie, garantire una transizione di qualità verso il mondo del lavoro e quindi vietare la pratica discriminatoria dei tirocini non retribuiti. Anche questa mattina abbiamo sentito testimonianze piuttosto gravi che riguardano anche le istituzioni europee, no? E questo per noi sono elementi su cui lavorare da subito, perché bisogna dare il buon esempio. E se le istituzioni europee non danno il buon esempio non sono credibili, e la credibilità per le nostre istituzioni è tutto. Attuare una strategia europea integrata dell'Unione Europea sulla fuga dei cervelli. Abbiamo sentito alcune esperienze anche come Torno Subito, ma anche Erasmus lavora in questa direzione, e che la mobilità sia una scelta, non una condanna. Sia una scelta consapevole quella di essere cittadini del mondo, cittadini europei, e avere anche la possibilità di tornare nel proprio paese se si vuole, investire quelle competenze, quelle esperienze anche nella propria comunità. Ecco, quindi la mobilità deve essere una scelta e non una condanna. Ecco, io penso che da ultimo dobbiamo, perché abbiamo ascoltato molte testimonianze, ragionare su un piano europeo per la protezione della salute mentale nei sistemi di istruzione e formazione, compreso l'apprendimento informale e non formale. Il piano dovrebbe promuovere un sostegno psicologico gratuito e regolare per gli insegnanti, gli educatori e i professionisti dell'assistenza all'infanzia, oltre che per i ragazzi e le ragazze. Io penso, e ho finito, che il ruolo che ci compete anche come socialisti, perché questo è anche uno scambio politico, è quello di non immaginare l'amministrazione dell'Unione Europea, ma una volontà grande, importante, ambiziosa di cambiamento, di cambiare le cose radicalmente. Per farlo non serve la prudenza, serve coraggio. Più sovranità popolare, più democrazia, più giustizia sociale e ambientale, più politiche pubbliche gratuite, più istruzione, più conoscenza, più cultura, più università, più ricerca. Questa è un pezzo della nostra agenda, anche dell'agenda di parte, cioè dei socialisti e democratici. Per avere questo coraggio serve anche una spinta generazionale, importante, forte, compatta. Ecco, io per questa spinta anche questa mattina vi ringrazio per i contributi che avete dato e per averci sollecitato a fare di più e meglio. Grazie a tutte e tutti.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for taking part in these discussions, for sharing your own experience, but also for raising other issues that can continue this discussion, of course, now over an informal lunch, but in the coming months and in the coming years, I, for one, believe that the European Year of Youth is a state of mind and is not going to end at the end of this year. So we need to continue these discussions and exchanges. Thank you very much for taking part. Thank you very much for following us online. Of course, thanks a lot to the organizers and to our interpreters for being with us this morning. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Bye-bye.
And you are all invited for the light lunch. We will guide you through. It's just 2 levels up. So you will see some signs and we meet you there. We continue the discussions there. Thank you.